Hello and welcome to tonight's presentation, 10 Great Native Shrubs for Shade. I'm Lexi from Sagmarine Native Plant Community, and I'm here with Kathy.
Hello, everybody.
We're really excited to present some amazing shrubs for all of those shady spots in your yard. They're extremely versatile, beautiful, and support numerous moths, butterflies, birds, and other wildlife. So this evening we'll be looking at American Witch Hazel, Vernal Witch Hazel, Smooth Hydrangea, Common Ninebark, Gray Dogwood, Arrowwood Viburnum, Maple Leaf Viburnum, Spicebush, Red Osier Dogwood, and Bush Honeysuckle.
Now, we are coming from the Chicago area, so we are actually in zone 6A. But these shrubs that we're going to be talking about tonight have a native range that is much larger than our area. So these shrubs are going to be native and suitable for a good portion of the country. So this is pertinent to a whole lot of us out there. Now, luckily for us, there's a lot of our native shrubs, and as you'll see moving forward, that these native shrubs have so much benefit. But there's a lot of these native shrubs that do very well in shady areas. And they're meant to be in the understory and under the canopy of the taller shade trees. So if you are somebody that has a lot of shade trees, and you're looking to add beauty and flower and ecosystem benefit to the lower levels of your landscape, then there's a number of awesome native shrubs that are going to work for you. So this diagram is just kind of showing you the different layers of our landscapes. And native shrubs and understory trees are considered by many to be the most important layer of our landscape for the reasons that you're going to see in the upcoming slides. But I just wanted to show you, we have the canopy, which is our larger shade trees. This is our oaks, our maples, our birches. And then we have the understory trees, which is the small, like the red buds and the pagoda dogwoods and the service berries, but also the shrubs. So the understory is considered the shrubs and small understory trees. Of course, we have vines in natural landscapes. We have ground covers in natural landscapes, really hugging the ground with the herbs or perennials that we plant, the forbs. And then there's also the root crops and mushrooms. So you basically have, I mean, to keep it simple, think of three very short layers, then the middle layer, and then the tall layer. And so that middle layer has so much habitat and ecosystem value that, as I said, is considered by many to be the most important layer of our landscape. So if you have any room in your landscape to add some of these understory trees and shrubs, you will be doing an amazing thing for your local ecosystem.
So the flowers of these native shrubs provide pollen and nectar for our pollinators and beneficial insects. When you plant one of these shrubs, the number of insects and pollinators that you will attract to your yard is just kind of unbelievable, and you'll start seeing them right away. They just know how to find the plants. Here we've got an amazing question mark butterfly on common ninebark, which is a beautiful flowering shrub and very adaptable to many different situations, and is also native to a lot of our country.
Doesn't that question mark butterfly look so graceful? It looks like a ballerina on the flower.
I just love this angle on this butterfly too, because you could see the eyes, you could see its little proboscis, and it's just, enjoying its time on that flower, getting the nectar. Everything it needs is there. The sun, the nectar.
We should all take the time and stop and smell the flowers as much as this question mark.
Yes.
He would look just as happy as he or she.
Exactly. So not only are they supporting all of our pollinators and our butterflies, but they're also host plants for many species of important moths and butterflies. So this one here is the hydrangea sphinx moth, which it's named after the smooth hydrangea. And it's just really incredible the number of moths that these shrubs support. And there's actually more moth species than there are butterfly species, and they're a critical part of our ecosystem, supporting our birds as a food source with their caterpillars. And they're just really pretty amazing creatures.
That's for sure. Remember, we can't live without our birds, and those birds can't live without insects, and particularly caterpillars. And speaking of birds, our native shrubs also provide wonderful food for our adult birds. The baby birds need insects and particularly caterpillars to feed, but the adult birds, many of our adult birds need the berries and or seeds from these wonderful native shrubs for their food source. They're a very important food source. Here you can see the American robin on Spicebush. So when you see that these, when the American robins kind of disappear from your landscape after they have their babies, they're looking for the worms in your grass while they're, having their young. But when they're done having their young, about July-ish or so, July, maybe August, they kind of seem to sort of disappear from our yards. And that's because they're out in the forest preserves and out in natural lands looking for these fruiting shrubs to eat the berries off of. So they switch their diet and are looking more for those berries. And it's those berries on these shrubs that get them through winter. Our native shrubs also provide wonderful nesting sites for our birds and protection for both birds and beneficial insects. So these shrubs are just wonderful protection, cover, protection from hawks. So it's giving them food, it's giving them places to nest, and it's giving them places to hide and be safe, and also to be sheltered from the elements, like this pine siskin on American witch hazel. Lexi and I were just talking before we started how, of course, I know we think everything is cute, but come on, you have to admit, I mean, look at this cutie on our American witch hazel, wonderful shrub. And so now we're going to get into the different shrubs for shady areas. Before I do, I just want to, of course, ask you to please like this video and subscribe to our channel. That will really help us get this information out to more people, and we would really appreciate your help in doing that.
First, we're going to look at two different witch hazels, and this one is the American witch hazel, and it gets the tallest out of all of the shrubs that we're going to look at tonight. So 10 to 20 feet tall. This is definitely a large shrub or a small tree, and it's not for the small landscape. You can see in this setting here, it's got a nice space to grow, but it can definitely tolerate lots of shade and be that understory tree underneath your taller oaks and other large trees. It is adaptable though, so it can do full sun to full shade. And I think most of the shrubs that we're looking at today, they're all very, very adaptable, and even with the soil conditions. So this one, dry to moist soil, you don't get much easier than that. It
Really,
blooms.
look at that, full sun to full shade, dry to moist soil. There is not a place where this shrub won't thrive.
Exactly. And I think what's also very surprising about these native shrubs is their growth rate and just their adaptability. So if you're really trying to fill something in to get a more mature landscape look, these native shrubs are just incredible. In one season, they can do so much to fill out and fill in. And of course, they're providing all that ecosystem value at the same time. So the difference between the American witch hazel and the next one that we're going to look at is the bloom time. So the American witch hazel blooms September to November, so we're blooming in the late fall. The flowers are just loved by the pollinators. So this one is good for the late season pollinators and the bees. They're also looking at, our different asters and our goldenrods in this time. But by November, a lot of those asters have faded, and this is what they're going to live off of. Birds also love the fruit, and it is a host plant for at least 70 species of butterflies and moths. So when we talk about ecological powerhouses, that's where these shrubs come into play, is that they're just absolutely critical for all of these insects.
I was just thinking this blooms September to November. I mean, how cool is that? How many shrubs are there, or trees for that fact, that are blooming in the fall? I mean, we were just saying, it's kind of sad to see everything dying back. All we're seeing is our asters and our goldenrods, but here you have a fall blooming shrub. There's not too many of those.
And it's just incredible color too. Like who doesn't want to see that in the fall landscape?
Exactly. That's an amazing shrub.
Absolutely amazing. And here's our native shrub or our native range on the map. So it's about half of the country and even California. Not sure why we've got
How
it.
did that, well, look at that.
So it's best known for these amazing yellow flowers. And here's another good example, this photo showing it in front of a house. Maybe there's, parkway trees lining the street, but you could still do an understory tree like this in front of a house or in a backyard under other trees too. But even in the cold Midwest where we are located, the blooms can persist into November and beyond, which is just such a wonderful splash of color when things start to get very cold.
Warms you up inside.
It does.
Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about is Vernal Witch Hazel. And I'm going to be honest with you, this one is not native to the area that we are in. It is not native to the Chicago area, as you'll see in the next slide. But the reason why I am including it is because it is a witch hazel, just like the American witch hazel that we just showed. And therefore, it is the host plant to the same species as the one that we just showed. So it's a good substitute for the American witch hazel if you don't have room for a shrub that size. The vernal witch hazel stays much smaller. It gets 6 to 10 feet tall, usually more just like 6 or 7, like an average shrub, and it's very easy to maintain to a smaller size. So this is a great option to have in a smaller landscape in place of our American witch hazel, and we're still feeding those same species that are reliant on that witch hazel. This one also will grow in, well, this one will grow in full sun to part shade. So not quite as shade tolerant as the American witch hazel, but still pretty shade tolerant. I have one of these in my yard, and it is under a birch tree. So this might be getting an hour or two of sun in the morning, maybe some indirect light late in the afternoon as the sun sets. But this is definitely, uh, I would call it in shade. And it's thriving.
And I have two that are in super deep shade and they're thriving too. And
Okay,
their pest resistance is amazing. When other things, might be that aren't native are getting eaten up, these things have no problem whatsoever.
the leaves they just look so healthy. The leaves almost remind me of a white oak. They're just such pretty leaves. And it's so, the other day I was out there, I was back there by it, cleaning up after the doggies. And I was looking on there and I could see the buds already for the the next year's flowers. And this blooms in the very early spring, late winter. This will bloom in February or March. So it's really on a different bloom time than the American witch hazel. And last February, I remember we had a very warm day and I was out in the yard and an uncharacteristically warm day, maybe it was in the 50s or 60 in February. And in February, there were not honeybees on my vernal witch hazel, which was blooming at the time. So it's like that sure made spring seem like it started sooner by having bees in my yard on a flowering shrub in February. You can't get better than that. It has fragrant orange and yellow blooms that last 3 to 4 weeks, so they do last a very long time, and attractive bronzy new foliage that matures to the darker green color. The leaves turn golden in the fall. The seeds are very attractive to birds in September and October, and this is hardy in zones 4 to 8. And as you'll see here, like I said, it is not native here, but it's feeding the same species as our native witch hazel. And if you have a smaller yard, you just may not have room for the larger witch hazel, and you can't, and it'd be much harder, even though you can trim the larger witch hazel, you're not going to be able to keep it as compact as you're going to be able to keep the vernal witch hazel. And as you can see, here's two species that native witch hazels are the local host plant for. We have the spring azure butterfly, and what is this guy? Oh, the witch hazel dagger moth. Well, I should have known that. But like Lexi said, I mean, our witch hazels are host plant to at least 69 species of butterflies and moths. Great, awesome shrubs.
This is another fantastic shrub, the smooth hydrangea, and is an excellent replacement for all of those multitude of cultivars that are out there. And it's just so beautiful and has all of these benefits for our insects and our birds. It's pretty small. It grows 3 to 4 feet tall, shade to part shade. So it definitely loves the shadier zones. Medium soil with consistent moisture. They will spread about 3 to 6 feet wide, so they can fill in and cover up quite a bit of area. And its growth rate is fast. So if you're trying to fill something in, this might be a good option. Its nectar is just the nectar-rich flowers are just loved by the pollinators, and it'll bloom May through June, and it can keep blooming through until September. How late did yours bloom through, Kathy?
I had a bloom on mine in early September. So what
Wow.
it does is it blooms on new growth. So it grows and you have a heavy bloom. And then after that, you'll have a little bit of like growth here and there during the summer. And so you'll get an occasional bloom on that new growth for the rest of the summer.
Amazing. So this is hardy in zones 3 to 9, and it also has some interesting benefits too. One is that it will grow under black walnut trees, which a lot of people have issues with. What can I grow under these trees? Because it really affects the soil pH. And another thing that it can do is stabilize slopes. So it's very good for erosion control. It is the larval host plant for the hydrangea sphinx moths, which we're going to take a look at, and we'll have a close-up of these beautiful, dainty lace cap flowers. So here's our native range. It's mostly in the eastern US, all the way down to Florida though, so that's pretty cool. And here's a picture again of our hydrangea sphinx moth, and then this is a close-up of what the flowers look like. And they're just a little bit different structurally than those big ball hydrangeas that most people are used to seeing, but they're definitely a lot easier to take care of than your typical hydrangeas, which really suffer in the super hot conditions. When there's a drought, they're all wilting. So the smooth hydrangea, the native hydrangea, it can survive all of that and really thrive.
And let me like for people who have not seen, we made a video about a month ago, native shrubs for small spaces, and that if you haven't seen that, that might be something that you want to check out if you have a smaller suburban yard, but you're looking for shrubs that can be very compact. And this was one of the ones we talked about on there, and we kind of went more specifically into the difference between our cultivar hydrangeas and our native hydrangea. And for this, I just want to quickly say, you'll notice that the native hydrangea has these flowers that look like little lace caps, and then you just see it's like these little teeny tiny flowers, and then periodically you see a larger open flower. All of the hydrangeas that we're used to seeing are cultivars, and they cultivate them to be bigger and poofier and have showier flowers. And our Annabelle hydrangea that a lot of you are probably familiar with, that has the big white poofy flowers, and there's even a cultivar of that called the Incredible, which like even bigger, poofier flowers. And those actually are cultivars of a naturally occurring mutation that occurred in Anna, Illinois. So an unusual plant where all of the individual little flowers were the big ones rather than the little ones occurred, and then they cultivated off that. That's why it's called the Annabelle hydrangea. And then there's been more cultivars off of that to make the flowers bigger and showier. The problem is those bigger, showier flowers don't have any value to pollinators. And as you'll see here, I mean, and even if you see bees on it, they're going to it foraging, looking for pollen and nectar, but they're not finding any. And like the bigger, what looks to be open flowers that you see on here, those few bigger open ones are just to attract the bees in. But it's those little tiny flowers that are abundant all across the flatter shape of this flower that are the ones that are fertile and that do have, you know, pollen and nectar in there. But if you're looking at a regular hydrangea that's made up of all these larger flowers, that's that very poofy look, that's a sterile flower with no pollen and nectar and provides nothing for our pollinators, which was shocking to me when I heard that, and I just wanted to spread the shock here.
Yeah, that's super fascinating. I didn't know that either until just a short while ago when
I
we
know.
were doing these presentations. And it's like, okay, that makes sense. And nature is just so smart in how it sets things up for all of these creatures.
So here we have the next one, common ninebark. This is the easiest, most robust shrub that I can't even tell you. That this is just a plant it and leave it and just marvel at its beauty type of shrub. It will grow 5 to 10 feet tall. So again, you can, just like you would trim your burning bush or your forsythia or the myriad of non-native shrubs that have become popular in the country, you can trim it to keep it, you know, smaller like you do those. It likes full sun to parch it, or you can let it get bigger to form like a privacy screen or a privacy hedge along your property. So you can use it for both purposes. It likes full sun to part shade. My bet is this would grow perfectly fine in full shade because I don't think, I mean, this just grows anywhere. Dry to moist soil. It's hardy in zones 2 to 8. It blooms May and June and is loaded with pollinators when it is blooming. It's, I mean, this is an understatement. Adaptable and easy to grow. Trust me, if you think that you struggle, you know, with having a green thumb, you will be fine with this plant. It's just so easy and agreeable. Takes well to pruning, so you can keep it small if you would like. It's especially loved by our mining bees, which are cute little bees. A great choice to increase biodiversity in your landscape. Birds love the seeds that it produces. I believe you need 2 to produce abundant seeds. It's great for all season interest, and it is also a larval host plant for many species. Now, when I say not for small landscapes, meaning this is a shrub that's going to get 5, 6, 7 feet tall. In our talk about native shrubs for small spaces, we talk about a lot of shrubs that only get 2, 3, 4 feet tall. But this is by no means a huge shrub. It is one that you can keep at a moderate size, suitable for most landscapes. And here are just a few examples of some of the many moths that it is a host plant to. We have the large maple spanworm, the bluish spring moth. I like that name. The hitched arches moth. I still want to know who comes up with these names. There's somebody who sits around and just comes up with these names. And the glorious Habrosine moth.
I actually saw, I think it was this large maple spanworm. I thought it was a leaf like falling into a shrub, and it was a moth. It was just unbelievable. So they really can camouflage for different situations, and it's just so clever.
Do you have Ninebarks, Lexi?
I don't, but I grew a bunch by seed, and I'm planning on making a privacy screen with them next summer. So they're still little babies.
And this is a fast growing shrub. So if you need a privacy screen and you don't want to wait, you know, years and years for it, this would be a good shrub. I think you'd have a pretty good privacy screen in 2 or 3 growing seasons.
Yeah, that's exciting. A lot of people really want something fast.
Yes. And here is the photo or diagram of its native range. So you can see it is native to most of the eastern and central US. I love those
Okay.
berries.
Oh, I love them too. And some people call
Look
them,
at the white with like the pink stems. Is that not cute?
it's such a hot pink color too. It can be kind
Yeah.
of red, so red to pink for, this stem, but a lot of people call these doll's eyes, just a really interesting, beautiful white little berry. And can you imagine just having a shrub full of these? How spectacular.
I
This
know.
is this is another shrub that gets pretty tall. So this one gets 10 to 15 feet tall, up to 10 to 15 feet wide. So if you do plant these, you want to give them some space to grow. Its growth rate is moderate. It's a multi-stem deciduous shrub, so it'll lose its leaves. It can tolerate full sun to part shade and medium soil. So again, not super picky about its conditions. It will bloom in May and June and then produce these small white berries. They're called drupes, and they ripen in the late summer, attracting birds and other wildlife. And then the leaves will turn a striking reddish purple color in the fall. So we're supporting the pollinators with the flowers, the birds feed on the berries, and we're also providing shelter for the small wildlife. And we've got this stunning contrast of white and pink. It's also very good for erosion control, those deep roots sucking up the water and stabilizing the land. And it's resistant to most pests and diseases, which, we'll find most of these native shrubs really are. It's also a larval host plant for numerous moths, and it is hardy in zones 4 to 8. And we'll take a look at our native map too. So here's our native range. This one's a little bit further north, so eastern and Midwest. Here you can see kind of how large it gets and the beautiful structure of those leaves. They kind of have a pointed shape to them, and it's a really beautiful shrub, and it supports over 120 species of moths and butterflies, including the spring azure, making it an excellent shrub to plant in your landscape. So take a look at these amazing examples here. The dogwood thyroid moth, I'm probably saying that wrong. The scarce infant moth, what another interesting name. This one, you can see it's on a finger. I don't know who gets these moths to land on their fingers. I'd like to know the tricks to do that, but it is pretty tiny and is one of those underwing moths. So when it expands its wings, it has kind of this bright surprise. And here again, we see our friend the spring azure, which these shrubs are just so critically important to supporting all these moths and butterflies.
That's amazing. Over 120 species of caterpillars and moths use our dogwoods as a host plant, or
I
at
think
least
that
the gray dogwood.
that's one of the highest numbers I think we've seen across all of these shrubs.
Yes, yes. I think viburnums are pretty good. Have a pretty high amount of larvae that they're the host of. But the Arrowwood viburnum, these I do have 2 of. Great shrubs, beautiful flowers. This shrub grows 6 to 10 feet tall. Again, this is a shrub that you can keep well trimmed as a landscape shrub. You can also, make it form a hedge. You can make it form a privacy screen, or you can keep it as a trimmed shrub in your landscape. Even if people don't want to get into creating large pollinator gardens and they're concerned about, the room that it would take, we can create so much habitat just by using our native shrubs in our landscape. You're going to put some shrubs in front of your house anyway. Why not have it be native shrubs that service our local ecosystem? And this would be a wonderful native shrub to have in any landscape. It grows in full sun to part shade. Again, mine is, and when we say part shade, they probably flower a little bit more prolifically if it's in part shade. But again, mine is under that same birch tree as the Vernal Witch Hazel I mentioned. And if it gets 1 to 2 hours of you know, filtered sun a day, that's good. And it thrives, and it's been there many, many, many years, and I get a lot of flowers on it, and I get a ton of berries on it. So I personally would say that by my experience, it will grow in virtually full shade as well. It likes medium moist soil, blooms in May and June. As we said, very attractive to pollinators, those flowers. Birds love the berries, and our viburnums have very protein dense, nutritious berries that are really going to help. If they last on the shrub long enough, they're really going to help our migrating birds make a safe and healthy journey. Takes very well to summer pruning, so you can very much control the size of it. It is a larval host plant for many, many species. Beautiful fall color. The flowers, I know it says that they smell unpleasant. I've never smelt them. I mean, if they smell unpleasant, it's not something you can smell through your yard. I guess you would have to put your nose up to it, but I've never smelled one. Now I gotta smell them, but now I gotta wait till next May. I've never smelled them. Will sucker and form colonies, and not for super small landscapes, but perfectly fine for an average landscape because, as we said, you can keep this shrub trimmed. It's hardy in zones 3 to 8. Here you can see the hardiness, not the hardiness, the native range, native to the eastern and lower central US. And there you can see what the berries look like, and they just love them. Mine don't make it till fall. As soon as they turn blue, somebody's out there eating them. But there have been times where I have seen on migration some really unique birds that stop in my yard specifically to eat the viburnum berries, like if you're a birder, a number of thrushes, hermit thrush and so on, that have stopped in on their migration to graze to eat these berries because they're just such nutritious, nutritionally dense food supply for them. And it is a host plant for the spring azure butterfly, as well as many other species of butterfly and moth.
And just real quick before we go on to maple leaf viburnum, the arrowwood viburnum is called arrowwood because the Native Americans actually used to make arrows from its branches and stems.
Oh,
Isn't
that's
that cool?
right. That is really cool.
Okay, so if you're looking for a viburnum that is a little bit smaller, maple leaf viburnum might be a good bet for you. This is only going to grow 4 to 6 feet tall versus 6 to 10 of the arrowwood viburnum, and it'll get about 3 to 4 feet wide. This one is really preferential to shade and part shade. This is something that you can see in a woodland, kind of like in this picture that we've got here. It likes moist but well-drained soil, and it has these gorgeous white flowers, which most of the viburnums do, that attract the pollinators in the spring. And the birds just love these berries. I believe these berries are actually a red color. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yes. Yes,
So,
they are.
and these are fall berries. So,
They
as
are. And I want to say, I see here that it says beautiful burgundy fall color. I will attest to that. These really look so lovely in the fall landscape because I mean obviously the leaves have a maple look, so it almost reminds you of like a crimson maple, a little mini crimson maple in your yard. Very, very peaceful, beautiful fall color.
but without those helicopters at the
That's
maples.
right, no helicopters.
Yeah, they're not going to have those problems. It can adapt to locations with more sun with sufficient water. So this one is really, really happy in a shady, moist woodland kind of setting. It is tolerant of the black walnut trees too, so that's a huge bonus. And it will become more drought tolerant when well established. And our viburnums are, again, larval host plants for more than 100 species of butterflies and moths. So imagine all that you will be doing just by planting one of these.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is a shrub, some you need two to get good berry production on them. Our viburnums set berries very well without, even if you just have one. You don't need a second shrub.
And here's just a little bit of detail. So the leaves looking like the maple leaves, just really beautiful shape there. And then these gorgeous white flowers. And here's our native range map. It's native to the eastern and the lower central US all the way down to Texas and Florida.
Spicebush. I'm glad I'm talking about this one because I purchased one at our shrub sale and I'm excited about planting it this fall. I have never grown one, but I'm looking forward to seeing my first Spicebush swallowtail caterpillar, which you did see this year, right, Lexi?
I saw the butterfly. I did not search the leaves for the caterpillars, which I should have
Okay.
done. Yeah.
So this grows 6 to 12 feet tall, but it can be kept just like many of the others. You can keep this a smaller landscaped shrub, which I have it in a shady corner, and that is what I will do. I want to keep this 6 feet tall, no more than 5 to 6 feet wide, preferably 5 feet wide. So I will keep this trimmed to keep it a smaller shrub, which it will do fine with. It likes medium to wet soil in full sun to part shade. And by part shade, I mean, you probably would like, 2 to 3 hours of filtered shade, but it is supposed to be very shade tolerant. So these are, you know, it may flower a little bit better if it has a little bit more sun, but it's going to be fine if you have a full shade area. That's why I'm going to be planting this on the north side of the house in a corner, and there's a birch tree there. So this is just going to get a little bit of afternoon sun at best. Blooms in early spring before it leaves out. And it is the larval host plant for the iconic Spicebush swallowtail butterfly that we mentioned. And on the next slide, I'm sure you're going to see a photo of that really cool caterpillar. It produces bright red berries in the late summer to fall, but you do need more than one to get those berries. So you would need to plant 2 of these shrubs, or you'd have beautiful fruiting if you had these as a hedge or along a fence row. The leaves are aromatic when crushed, and they turn this beautiful yellow in the fall. Tolerates many soil types. It's ideal for woodland gardens, naturalized areas, and along streams or ponds because it does have a high tolerance for moisture. It's hardy in zones 4 to 9. And here we see the native range, and this is definitely a heavy shrub of the eastern US and into the south central US. And it looks like it goes up into parts of Canada as well. There's a picture on the left of the really cool yellow flowers, so if you have if you love your spring yellow flowers and you want to go native and instead of the non-native forsythia, which doesn't really service our ecosystem at all. It's not invasive. I'm not saying you have to pull it out, but it doesn't really do much for our local ecosystem. So if you wanted a spring yellow flowering shrub, you could go with the spicebush instead, or you could even go with the Vernal Witch Hazel and have those beautiful yellow blooms. And then there, if you have at least 2, there you can see the really cool berries that you would get. And it is look at how attractive it is. This is a young one that goes in. It's just a very, you know, the foliage is just attractive and neat, and it's just kind of like a neat, tidy looking shrub is the best way I can put it. Just really pretty foliage. It's a larval host plant for the spicebush swallowtail. As we said, look at that guy. Those are not really eyes. They are markings on the caterpillar to make it look ferocious to scare off predators. So I think he or she is so comical, and they roll themselves up in the leaves. And so you kind of have to, like, I guess, unroll the leaves a little bit to find these guys in there with those ferocious eyes. Oh my gosh, it'd be scary.
So scary. I love seeing the thumb in this picture too, because it just gives you such a great sense of the scale.
It
And
does.
yeah, they look like they could be huge worms, but are snakes or something, but they're not. So red osier dogwood, this is another incredible multi-season shrub that just adds so much color and depth to your landscape. A little bit more on the medium side compared to some of these other big ones, but grows 6 to 9 feet tall. This one can also get 6 to 9 feet wide, and its growth rate is super fast. It likes full to part sun, medium to wet soil. This is going to bloom in May and June, and again, is just beautiful in all 4 seasons, starting with the beautiful spring white flowers that are loved by our pollinators, that then turn into these nice white berries that grow in the late summer and are a favorite for our birds. The twigs are this red color. That's why it's called red dogwood. And it also has a beautiful red foliage. And once all the foliage has dropped, the stems will stay red and provide this extremely dramatic landscape in the winter. Its tendency to spread makes it great for privacy screening, and it's hardy in zones 3 to 8. And here you can see that spectacular view in the winter. Can you just imagine looking out and seeing this and just being so inspired by the color?
I mean, think of that. I mean, you have this beautiful backdrop. Let's say you put this along a fence or along like a line of your property, and you have, the great shrubs and berries and flowers all season, and the beautiful foliage. But then imagine looking at, like, along the whole back of your yard or something. Imagine just looking at a line of those red twigs all winter. How
Absolutely
amazing. I mean, it
stunning.
just completely takes away all the dreary brown of winter, right?
It really does. The native landscape in winter is just phenomenal.
It is. I mean, and I don't say that lightly. I feel sometimes like the more native plants I have added to the landscape, it is beautiful in the winter. The seed heads, the colors, I mean, it really is beautiful in the winter.
And
More
you don't
so,
have to
much more so than non-native plants.
And you don't have to do that cleanup that's associated with the non-native plants. You can just leave the stems and you're leaving the food and the nesting sites for the bees and just let it go.
Yep,
Less work.
less is more. We'll be doing a video on that in the next couple weeks.
So here's our native range, and look at that. We've got one that's onto the west side of the country, which is great, all the way up into Canada too. And it kind of just stops in the middle, and sorry about the southern states, but this is where it's native to. And it is a larval host plant again for many butterflies and moths, including the gorgeous spring azure and summer azure butterflies, which are just spectacular when you see them open their wings. Just incredible little creatures.
Another great one, and this is one if you have a very small landscape, very small yard, this is one that's going to definitely work for you. We also included this in our native shrubs for small spaces. This is our dwarf bush honeysuckle. This I'm having a hard time. I'm just staring at that cute little bumblebee. I mean, that little fuzzy thing is just adorable. This grows only 2 to 5 feet tall and about 3 to 4 feet wide. So, that's That's it maxed out without you having to trim it. So very, very, very good shrub for very small spaces and small yards. It grows in full sun to part shade. It likes medium moisture and it blooms with these yellow blooms in June and July, which attract many species of butterflies and bees and other pollinators. Those tubular flowers are also very much loved by our hummingbirds, and it produces small capsule-like fruits, which I think we can see some in the back there if I'm not mistaken. The leaves are green in the growing season and turn yellow to reddish purple in the fall. But like as you can see on this, it's still flowering and some of the leaves are already getting the purplish color. So it's a very unique plant with shades of purple and yellow and green all massed together. So it just has a very unique seasonal color in the landscape. Tolerates a wide range of soil conditions. It is drought tolerant once it's established, and it works great to prevent erosion on lakefront properties without blocking the view. If you live in an area where you're along a pond or you're along a lake and you want to prevent your shoreline from eroding into the body of water, but you still want to see the water, this would be a great option for you. Now, this is also called bush honeysuckle, and it is not to be confused with the very, very widespread non-native invasive honeysuckle. There is an invasive honeysuckle that was brought here, I think from China, and it is horrible. It is taking over our natural lands. It is taking over our forest preserves because, again, it's a shade-tolerant shrub, so it's completely taking over our forest preserves, and you don't want to get that. But this is a wonderful, this is our native honeysuckle. So just when you purchase it, just be sure that you are looking for that Latin name, D'Urvilla lanicera. That is the Latin name of our native honeysuckle. And that is the only honeysuckle that you want to purchase other than possibly the honeysuckle sempervirens, which is a native honeysuckle vine in our area that gets, it's called coral honeysuckle. But just be very careful about the honeysuckles you buy because there is an awful invasive one out there as well. Wonder what the Latin name, what do you think? Would you mind looking up real quick, Lexi? What is the Latin name of the awful invasive honeysuckle so everybody knows what to steer clear of?
Yeah, let me do that.
So here are some photos of the dwarf bush honeysuckle, and you can see that between the stems being kind of a purple color and the leaves starting to gradually turn purple early in the season, it has a very nice, soft, pleasant, calming color to it. It's just a beautiful plant, and you can see here where even they created a formal hedge, a formal hedgerow along the foundation of their house with these and they're very small, so it has a very, very neat, formal look, and it's a native plant. So if you ever thought that you can't have a neat, formal landscape with native plants, that is absolutely not true. And please check out as I'll mention it again, please check out our video of native shrubs for small spaces. There are many plants that are very conducive to having a traditional, neat landscape. Did you?
So, yeah, the honeysuckles to avoid start with the name Lanicera. So the deer villa, that's our native one. So that's the word you want to go for. But the ones that are not native, Lanicera mackie, that's Amur honeysuckle, Tatarian honeysuckle, Lanicera tetarica, Maro's honeysuckle, Lanicera maroi, and Bell's honeysuckle, which is a hybrid of two of those. So they have aggressively spread, and we definitely want to avoid ever purchasing those and putting them in the ground, and definitely look for the native deer
I don't
villa.
care how good they smell. They're awful and they're choking out our forest preserves. And here we can see dwarf bush honeysuckle. We can see its native range. So this is very much a shrub native to the upper eastern US. And it is the host plant for the snowberry clearwing moth and the laurel sphinx moth. You're so good at finding pictures of these in hands. These are very trusting little moths. I don't know, like you said, I don't know how they're getting these cool pictures of them in their hand.
That's the next thing I'm going to research, how to get moths to land on your hand.
By next year, everyone, that'll be Lexi's hand there with the moth in it.
That would be amazing.
All right, so that is our 10 great native shrubs for the shade. I hope this was helpful to you. And once again, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and we will see you in our